Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. You can find me on Twitter at DanHarris80. It is Friday. We'll be doing game-by-game preview with Kyle Yates in just a few minutes with a surprise special guest host. But first, as we do every Friday, let's quickly welcome in Dr. David Chao from ProFootballDoc.com. You can find him on Twitter at ProFootballDoc. Doc, as always, thank you for fitting us in on what is a busy Friday for you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always enjoy chatting with you.
All right, big week. Big week. Let's get into it. Let's start with somebody who we know pretty much is not going to play this week, and that is Christian McCaffrey. Super frustrating for, managers rostering McCaffrey at this point. He had the shoulder, bye week, looks like he's going to come back. Then he tweaks his quad or his thigh or something like that. I mean, I know you usually are able to do analysis based on video. I don't think there's video here. So what do you think just with this? Do you think, are we going to see him again this season, even if he doesn't suit up in this game?
Well, Fantasy Pros podcast listeners, don't hate me. I know you guys have heard me say, week 14, Christian McCaffrey's playing. He'll be 100%, full touches, the whole deal. I've said it for weeks. Like when he got hurt from the shoulder, I was like, don't be surprised after the week 13 bye. And now here in week 14, fantasy football playoffs, and he's not playing. But it's not because of the shoulder, as you say. It's something else, the quad. So in this crazy year, Christian McCaffrey has always been healthy throughout his football career. Now has 3 injuries, right? Boom, one after the other. And no, he's not playing this week. And when I first saw tweaked quad I said on Wednesday and put out at the website, no, he's not playing. And Matt Rule has since said unlikely to play. And he'll probably get ruled out completely, doubtful or ruled out completely. Here's the thing, going by the pattern, will Christian McCaffrey be 100% next week if he's ruled out this quickly this week? Unlikely. And if he doesn't play next week, does it get unlikelier that he returns to play at all? Look, I think it's more likely that he doesn't play again this season than plays next week at this point in time. Maybe it's really mild and they're being extra careful and he turns the corner. I hope so. But based on pattern, look, I get it. If you carried him on your team the entire season, is it worth carrying him one more week if you make it through this week in playoffs? Probably, but I don't know. You got to make other plans.
Yeah, it legitimately just came across as you were talking that he has been declared doubtful. So actually not even ruled out. Technically at this point, he's not going to play this weekend. But maybe there's some silver lining of the fact that he's not yet ruled out and he's just doubtful. But yeah, and again, I remind everybody, Doc, we give advice on the show. A lot of times our advice, that isn't always perfectly on the mark. Don't shoot the messenger. Dr. Challenge is kind of relaying from his medical advice. So if you held on to McCaffrey, you waited this long, man, I hope you were able to get Mike Davis and hold on to him. Let's talk about another injured running back here who also is not expected to play. He hasn't been declared out as we talk about this, but we are expecting him to, and that is Antonio Gibson, who left the game against the Steelers very early with what I believe has been diagnosed as turf toe. So I think we're all assuming that he's not going to suit up this weekend against the 49ers. Do you think that he is done for the season? Is there a chance he comes back next weekend against Seattle?
If I were a fantasy manager and I had both Gibson and Christian McCaffrey on my team, but I had to get rid of one of them and only could hang on to one, I would hang on. As pessimistic as I sounded on Christian McCaffrey, I would hang on to Christian McCaffrey and let go of Antonio Gibson. The turf toe, very difficult to play through. I expect him to be declared out, not doubtful this week. Yep. And I am more pessimistic on Gibson and when he can return. If I had to bet, I would bet McCaffrey comes back before Gibson, even though I just said there's no guarantee McCaffrey comes back this year.
Yeah, well, if you roster Gibson, kudos to you if you made your fantasy playoffs, because obviously that was a big one that he kind of, you started him against the Steelers and then he gave you nothing, not his own fault due to the injury. So if so, you probably should be prepared to be without him for the foreseeable future. How about Josh Jacobs here? I mean, it sounded pessimistic on his availability for this weekend earlier in the week, but he did return to at least a limited practice yesterday. I haven't seen the practice report yet on Friday. Do you expect him to play in this game? If he does play, do you think he's going to be effective? And if not, will he at least be effective next week when they suit up?
Look, I rely on video of the injury first and foremost, more so than any other reporting. I rely on my eyes and my brain for the analysis. I never thought Josh Jacobs' injury was severe. I'm not at all implying that he's soft. There must be something there. But I still have believed that he would play this week. No question my confidence level got lowered when he didn't practice for the first day, etc. And when the Raiders brought in Spencer Ware for a look-see, that sort of made me more nervous. But I've still held cautious optimism that he could play this week and would play this week in the big battle against the Colts. And if he doesn't, then at least that means optimism for next week for sure. But I think he's close to playing still. That's my belief.
All right, good news there. Let's stick with running backs. Let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott. So it's some sort of calf issue. I'm sure you know even more about this than I do. It sounded like originally they thought it was a strain, but now Zeke at least has called it a contusion, which seems my limited understanding, painful, but usually you can play through, right? So what's your understanding of Zeke's calf injury and if he's going to be able to suit up?
Well, that was a nice summary right there, Dan. And, when it was thought to be a calf strain, because there's no video, I was pessimistic that Zeke would play. Having it declared a contusion, I'm actually optimistic that he will play. What's the difference? With a calf strain, it's technically a partial tear of the muscle, and it can linger and get worse. If it's a calf contusion, it's just getting the swelling and bruising out, and structurally everything is intact. So it's the difference. A contusion and versus a strain is like the difference from being hurt versus injured, right? The calf contusion, you're hurt, but you could play through. The calf strain, you're injured. So I do have optimism on Ezekiel Elliott.
Excellent. It's a great matchup this week against the Bengals, so hopefully he's able to get out there. How about A.J. Brown? So we saw everybody was watching that game. He went down. It looked painful. He limped off. Everybody said, oh, no, he's done. And then he came back and played through it and played well. He missed practice for the first 2 weeks with the ankle and for the first 2 days of practice this week with the ankle injury. He was able to return to practice today. So I'm optimistic, and he's been a big guy for fantasy managers. It's a good matchup. Do you think he's going to suit up in this one against Jacksonville? And will he be limited if he does?
I do think he's going to suit up. And when he went down, social media went wild with, non-contact injury. But those who are signed up and follow ProFootballDoc.com, we immediately said that's an inversion right ankle sprain, standard basketball type sprain. It's not an ACL. It's not an Achilles. It's not anything bad. And he has a good chance to get taped and return to the game, which he did, and he finished. Look, A.J. Brown has missed practice routinely with his knee, but always been a beast on Sundays. I think now he missed 2 practices because of his knee/ankle, but I still expect him to be a beast on Sunday. I think he's going to be good to go. And if you look at the matchups this week, it's pretty favorable when the Titans are going up against the Jaguars when the vast majority of their cornerbacks are down, and you can see that at our field view at ProFootballDoc.com.
Yeah, I will do in this age where everybody wants immediate I need to know what is happening immediately. I will again mention ProFootballDoc.com and your Twitter feed. That's where you need to go. If you need it immediately, you're watching this, you completely freak out. They got everything up almost immediately. So instant gratification. That's certainly what you should be doing if you're a fantasy manager like me who needs to know what is happening with injuries almost immediately. Let's go here to Daniel Jones. This sounds like he's going to be able to suit up this week after that hamstring injury. And again, we saw him in the game. He missed last week, but he got injured. He came back for a play, and then he limped off, clearly. Do you think, part of what he does is he provides value with his legs. Given that it's a hamstring injury, do you expect him to be nearly at 100% in this game?
Well, I actually just retweeted a video from Dan Dugan that shows Daniel Jones at practice. And it shows he moves pretty well in the pocket as he drops back, but you see a little hitch in his gait, and you can see all he does is jog downfield, and there's a slight hitch on that side. I think he's progressed well enough to play in the pocket. Could he scramble to get, 2 yards and a first down when his life depends on it? Yes. Are we going to see any explosive runs out of Daniel Jones, which has been part of his game downfield, at the high speeds with the analytics and so forth? No, and no way. So at this point, I believe Daniel Jones will play, but use him with caution. If you're relying on running yards, I don't think that's going to be there.
Yeah, that's great advice because that really is where a lot of his floor comes from, is his ability to sort of have these big rushing games on occasion and definitely just add that little bit of rushing ability each and every game. Let's finish up here on a guy who we're almost certain is not going to play this week, but who there's optimism for next week, and that is Drew Brees of the Saints. Again, we've had sort of this, however many fractured ribs he had the lung issue, so we're looking at probably not this week, my guess is, but do you think he's going to be able to come back in Week 15, big game against the Chiefs?
Well, from the get-go, we said middle of December or later December, right? But definitely December. And that's what it's going to work out. It doesn't look like that he'll practice this or play this week. I think he could. And if you think this, if the Saints were 0-3 with Taysom Hill, I guarantee you he'd be playing this week. Since they're 3-0, they have the Chiefs the following week in Week 15. I think they're being cautious and smart and giving Drew another week. But I have optimism. I think push come to shove. Look, I'll make this prediction.
Yep.
And I hope we never get to test it or see it. If for some reason Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston go on the COVID list as a surprise, and I'm not leaking it, I'm just saying hypothetically, Drew Brees will play this Sunday. That's my confidence level in this. So I think he's good to go next week. They're just giving him another week.
Awesome. Well, hopefully if you did roster Drew Brees and you were able to make the playoffs and you're able to survive this week, or you got to bye, hopefully you'll have the big guy back next week. As always, Dr. Chao, thank you for making the time for us on a Friday here. Remind everybody where they can find more of you and your work.
ProFootballDoc.com, which is free, no credit card. Just put in your email, or at ProFootballDoc on Twitter.
Excellent. Well, we're going to go right now into getting to every game of this weekend slate with a special guest host.
All right, everybody, welcome in to another episode of Dan and Kyle in the Morning. And I am not Dan, nor am I Kyle, but I am going to be your guest host for today. I am Lauren Carpenter. You guys better know me as Stepmom Lauren, or know me better as Stepmom Lauren, I should say. But don't worry, I still have Dan here, I still have Kyle here, and it is my chance to put Dan Harris here on the hot seat so that Kyle doesn't feel so by himself over there getting grilled every single Friday. However, before we get into anything else, everybody, if you have not done so, please follow us on Twitter at FantasyPros. You guys can also find Dan at DanHarris80, and you can find my old friend Kyle, Kyle Y NFL, on the socials, which nobody calls it anymore or ever. But you know what? I like to call it because I want to sound like an 80-year-old woman. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
I'm uncomfortable. I'll say this. I don't like being in this chair. Yates, is this what it feels like? Or are you just like, I'm just waiting with like dreaded anticipation of the questions that are going to come? Is this what I haven't been in the analyst chair in like a year? Is this what it's like for you I'm doing it?
This is what it's like every single day, man. You got to get used to it.
Oh my God. I had no idea how hard your life was, Yates. This is really tough because I usually get to direct the show and I can do what I want. Now I'm just at the mercy of Lauren Carpenter, and that's terrifying. Oh no, just go easy on us. We got a ton of games anyway, so hopefully it'll be like, oh, we don't have time to even talk. Let's move on. So I'm ready for that.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of time, but we do have a ton of games. But before we get into that, we're going to do our over-under prop apps for the MGM giveaway. Dan, you want to fill us in on what that means?
Yeah, hopefully if you've been listening to the show for the entire season, you know exactly what it is. It's the FantasyPros.com. You can find it at FantasyPros.com/challenge. It is free to play. 10 fantasy points over under that Lauren is going to give us. There are weekly prizes. There's the season-long prize if you guys have been playing all year. It is sponsored by BetMGM. The grand prize for the free contest is a 3-day, 2-night stay at an MGM resort property in Las Vegas. It includes round-trip airfare, and you can find it over at FantasyPros.com/challenge. I'm ready.
Okay, that just sounds so cool. Like, I really want to do that.
Yeah.
It's just, wow. Every time I hear this, I'm like, I have to be mishearing this, but I'm not. This is actually a real thing, which is super cool. So let's get right into it. These are pretty interesting, gentlemen, and I'm actually excited to hear what y'all have to say. First on the docket, Justin Herbert. Let's hope he has a better bounce-back game. But they want an over-under of 20.5 fantasy points. What do you think?
I'm going to go over against Atlanta. I think he's in for a big game, so I'll go over the 20.5.
Yeah, I will as well. Bounce back game here, and this is the matchup, right? This is the matchup where you bounce back against Atlanta and their secondary. I expect a big performance here. I'm plugging Justin Herbert back into my starting lineup as a top 5 option.
I love it. And we pick on Atlanta, not because we hate them, but because they bleed fantasy points. So, we love that in fantasy here. But all right, next up, we have It Hurts So Good, but Jalen Hurts against New Orleans. We have an over-under here of 15.3 fantasy points.
I'm going over, which feels gross because I have no idea what to expect right now. But I just feel like there's going to be some sort of broken play. They're not going to know how to defend him enough. Barely over 15.3. That's what I've got.
I'm going to go under. With Jalen Hurts, he has the potential to break away a long run, of course, with his mobility. But yet, against the Saints, I'm just not feeling confident in this offense and the way that it's looked. Even if Jalen Hurts performs really well, it's a very, very tough matchup. I'm going to go under.
I agree with Kyle here. This is a tough one for me against the Saints, but I am curious to see how Jalen Hurts performs. So this is going to mean a lot for the surrounding fantasy pieces. But let's move over to Seattle, guys. Running back Chris Carson versus the Jets. Over under 14.1 fantasy points.
I'm going to go over. I realize that the Jets are, not the easiest run defense, but he's going to find the end zone when Seattle is padding their 25-point lead. So I will go over with it.
I'll go over as well. Looking at the Vegas implied point totals here for Seattle, they're 30 points. And if that's the case, then you start your running backs in that situation because he can easily find the end zone. So, yeah, I'm going over with Chris Carson.
Love it, love it. And my playoff darling, David Montgomery for the Chicago Bears versus Houston. We have an over-under of 13.8, which I think is interesting. What do you guys think?
We have to be on the same page here. Yates, this is over,
yeah,
right?
It's way over here for me.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to smash it.
I totally agree. I think that line's a little low for him. All right, still sticking with our running backs here. Let's do Raheem Mostert. Does he still have an injury designation?
No, but he has I'm not the normal starting running back designation going on at this point
too.
with Jeff Wilson. Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Versus Washington, pretty surprisingly stout, which is pretty exciting to see, especially if you're a Washington fan. Over under 12 points even.
I'm going under. I don't know how you can trust him at this point after Jeff Wilson basically led the way in this most recent game. So I hope I'm wrong. I have some shares of Mostert. I'm going to need a playoff performance, but I'm going under against Washington.
I will go under as well. It's just slightly, but with the game script potentially getting out of hand here, even though San Francisco is favored in this one, I don't see how that happens with Nick Mullins and the pressure that Washington's defensive line can create up front. So I'm going under here with Raheem Mostert.
I see where you guys are coming from. I'm going to just play devil's advocate here. I'm going to go over, and I'm going to call Kyle Shanahanigans, however they say it. I think this is going to be a mixed-up game. I think Mostert's going to do pretty well. The 12-point line is kind of tough, but I'm just going to be that way. I'm going to say over just because I can. I would probably go with what the gentlemen say, not what I say. But, hey.
I hope you're right.
Here we go.
I hope you're right. Yeah.
All right, guys. So wide receiver here, DK Metcalf for the Seattle Seahawks versus the New York Jets. Over under 15.1.
I am going over.
I really don't know what the line would have to be for me to take the under. I'm taking the over here.
Yeah, that one's kind of set in stone almost. And then another high-scoring, high-flying wide receiver, Justin Jefferson for the Minnesota Vikings at Tampa Bay. Kind of stout there as well. Over under 14.1.
I'm going over here, too. I think they're going to need to throw. And, at this point, I'm willing to buy into Jefferson and his fantasy production each and every.
I like it. Yates?
Yeah, I had to look at my projections to see exactly where I had him, and I've clearly got the over here. I've got him projected for 18.5 fantasy points. I think you start Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. All right, so how about Brandon Cooks, wide receiver for the Houston Texans, against the Chicago Bears, over under 12.5?
I know he's pretty much the only game in town, but I am going to go under here. I mean, Chicago's still decent against wide receivers if you can exploit them. I think it's more of a Keke Coutee game as opposed to a Brandon Cooks game. So I've got under the 12.5.
I'm going slightly under, but it is very, very close. But I will take the slight under here.
I like it. I kind of think that 12.5 is almost on point for Brandon Cooks. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens with that game, and we'll talk a little bit about Houston and Chicago later on. But okay, we got two more left, guys. Wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, wide receiver for Buffalo, against Pittsburgh. 14 points, over under.
Right now I have mildly under. It's like so close.
Right?
I want to take the over, but my projections are 13.8, so I am going to go with under.
I'm going to go over here. Stephon Diggs seeing 10 targets last week. He's heavily involved in this offense, and this is actually a pretty favorable matchup for opposing wide receivers. So I think Stephon Diggs can find the end zone in this one, and that pushes him over the edge.
Yeah, I can see it both ways. I have no idea what to do with Stephon Diggs, except take Pepto-Bismol and hopefully don't get indigestion. It's really hard. All right, last one on the docket. We have a tight end here, Robert Tonyan against Detroit. Over under 8.6.
Yeah, it's a lot for a tight end, but I'm going over. I mean, I think he's almost one of the few tight ends that you can just guarantee trust, especially in this matchup. So I've got over.
I will go over as well. I've got him at 10 projected fantasy points, so I'm taking the clear over here.
I agree. If you have a healthy starting tight end, it's going to be the over when you're facing the Lions, which is sad. I'm sorry. My husband's a huge Lions fan. He's like closet Lions fan now. He's like super disappointed, but I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they'll have a little bit of spark on offense with Darrell Bevel now. They did pretty well last week. So we are going to go into our weekend previews, gentlemen. But before, I just want to remind everyone again, please go ahead and follow us on Twitter at FantasyPros. Keep up to date with all the content. Get yourself in a much better position to take home the championship, guys. It is week 14. Can you even believe it? It is. Actually, we already have our first game in the books for week 14 when we thought we weren't even going to have a season. It feels like that was yesterday. It's absolutely crazy. So just real quick, let's go ahead and pop into this Thursday night recap. This was, the revenge game, the Super Bowl 53 revenge and blah, blah, blah. Okay, this game didn't end in a Lombardi trophy. I get it. But this game did end pretty differently, if I can put it mildly, than the way the Super Bowl ended up. And welcome to the NFL, finally, for everyone who's been hanging on to him, Cam Akers. You guys, he had himself a historic game. I believe he rushed 171 yards, and I believe that is the most by a rookie running back so far this season. It is also the most ever rushed on the New England Patriots by a rookie running back. What did you guys take of his performance?
Yeah, you start us off. I'm always talking first. I feel bad. This is your moment to shine.
Yeah, Dan, you be quiet.
Moment to shine. Talking about Cam Akers might not be the proper designation for me. With Cam Akers, I was definitely down on him coming into this game because I thought that we couldn't trust Sean McVay. We couldn't trust the rotation here, and everything that he said this season has led to the assumption that they're just going to continue to roll in Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers. Even though we saw Cam Akers get the majority of the work last week, Darrell Henderson had that injury, and it was just, assumed that, okay, well, it was just because of that. Well, no, we were wrong. 29 carries. Goodness. This is what you want from a running back, especially heading into the fantasy football playoffs, into the next round, right? If you do advance. So with Cam Akers, man, I had him at 25 in my running back rankings this week, and it actually turned out that was in line with ECR, so a lot of the experts were down on him too, just because I think they had the same kind of questions, especially with his injury too, but he came out here swinging, looks like a locked and loaded low-end RB1 moving forward.
Yeah, I had him even lower. I had him 27th, and I moved him down shortly before the game. I was worried about the rib, and again, I don't know. It's the playoffs. I was like, am I really ready to trust that this is something that's actually going to happen? But man, not only did he look great, but obviously he got the work. I mean, I think Henderson and Brown, I checked the unofficial lines. It was like 13 snaps compared to Akers' 50. Like, this is his ball game right now. Jets and Seattle next. Not the greatest matchups for running backs, but, I use the phrase circle of trust all the time, firmly in it for me here going forward. If you made the playoffs with Akers, you started Akers, congratulations. You've got a guy you can start every week going forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way with you, Kyle. I wasn't confident about Akers. I even talked about it with my husband because he ended up plugging in Akers because he had questions at other positions. And it turned out really well, but I don't know if I'm as confident as you are, Dan, moving forward, because I can very easily see this turning into a Darrell Henderson show now that they kind of have their eye on Cam Akers, trying to scheme around him. You never know. There's lots of talent there. But if you started him, you're really happy about it. He also helped set up Cooper Kupp to have a really good game. It was on the back of Cam Akers, Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds that they got, I think it was a 17-play drive all the way down to the end zone, and the touchdown goes to Cooper Kupp. Even though it was Cam Akers, and you guys, he scored over 20 fantasy points, he meaning Akers, without even scoring a touchdown, may I just add right there, because Cooper Kupp got his touchdown. He had a nice point line, I should say. I think it was just over 14 points. It was Cam Akers and Cooper Kupp in this. I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
and it's stinky.
It's a disappointing day. For the most. I mean, you're not disappointed if you started Cooper Kupp, but yeah, I think I don't remember who the leading. I think it was Tyler Higbee was the leading receiver or something for the Rams. So not a huge day for the passing game. But what do you want when you can run the way they can run? Like the fact that Jared Goff scored 2 touchdowns. If you were brave enough to start Jared Goff, you should be happy because that was very easily a 0 touchdown game that was out there waiting for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, you start Cooper Kupp, you start Robert Woods every time out, and it's not always going to be pretty, but certainly against the Jets next week with extra rest, they should be fine in my opinion.
Right. And just real quick, before I'm going to punt this over to you, Kyle, in just a second. Do we have any more clarity on what to do with James White and Damien Harris?
I think we do. I think you bench them.
What about
Yates? Right? I mean, that's what I do. Yates. We talk about this. Can you confidently start any Patriot? And I feel like it's usually no. I would avoid them if I possibly can. Are we still there?
Oh yeah, I mean we've been there for the last 3 seasons. With Damien Harris, I've said he's a high end RB3, someone that you can plug in if you absolutely just need a floor play, but he offers very little upside. One, due to the state of the offense, but then two, Cam Newton being the goal line back around at the end zone. But then with James White, his anomaly of scoring 2 rushing touchdowns 2 weeks ago, I saw right through that and was like, yeah, no, we're not going anywhere near James White. So
right.
I had White very, very low in my rankings this week.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, I guess that makes that a little bit clearer. Is there anything else you guys want to add about that game? I mean, if you started any Patriots player, you're pretty disappointed. You're in a hole heading into the round 1 of our fantasy playoffs. And again, if it wasn't Cam Akers or Cooper Kupp, you're kind of lamenting any starters you put in there.
I guess the best thing I could say is if you were starting any Patriots players, you probably didn't make the playoffs anyway to get in there. So hopefully you didn't miss out too much. But now I think we're done. I think avoid all Patriots going forward, and let's go. Let's get into the games.
All right.
I'm ready.
Yeah, we do have all of the games. There's no buys. We're all done with that. We're on our week 14. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. And I'm kind of praying for some of these guys. So if I get really excited about them, it's like I'm trying to imbue them with fantasy love. So just, ignore me when that happens. But first game on the docket here I want to talk about is going to be Texans, at the Chicago Bears. And one thing that really stinks about watching a Bears game, if you're not a Bears fan, is there's no offense. The Bears don't really have that much offense, and their defense is so good that they don't allow much offense on the other side of the ball. So what are you guys going to do with these pieces? How do you feel about, let's say, Deshaun Watson in this game?
Yeah, you start us off. It's usual you respond to the host. I'll chime in.
Yeah, sure. So with the Texans side of the ball, with Deshaun Watson, I think he's still a must start. We saw that he could still succeed even in a tough matchup last week against the Indianapolis Colts. And the Chicago Bears defense over the past 2 weeks has been a little bit lax here, right? They've started to let things slide. They're not as stout of a unit as they have been earlier on in the season. So yeah, you can look at the receiving weapons here of Brandon Cooks, Keke Coutee, and Chad Hansen, and we can say that's not a fearsome unit, but yet Deshaun Watson still continues to get it done. So he's a low-end QB1 for me. I think you still got to fire him up. David Johnson is someone who I'm still plugging into my lineup as a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. And then I think with Brandon Cooks, he's someone that you got to look at as a low-end wide receiver too. And Keke Coutee is in that range as well for me, just a little bit lower because of what we saw last week. And he's got a great matchup against Buster Screen this week.
As always, Kyle, reading my mind. I was just going to ask you about David Johnson right after that. Dan, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in line with Yates other than I think QT. I mean, I have Watson 10th right now. My QB rankings this week are really weird. Like I'm just looking at who is where they are. Watson, though, is still a guy who, yeah, I don't have a ton of confidence in, given the fact that he has no weapons, given that the Chicago Bears defense, well, maybe not quite as stout as it was in the beginning of the season, is still very strong. David Johnson is the guy that Yates and I love to talk about in the, I don't want to start this guy. I'm obviously starting this guy. That's where he is for me. He's a very low-end RB2. And Brandon Cooks, for sure, you've got to start. Keke Coutee Yates, I'm interested. Where do you have him just a little bit lower than Cooks, or is he? Because for me right now, and I revised my projections on Saturday night. He's 44th for me right now. Wow. I want to move him up. I want to get him into the wide receiver 3 territory, but for now he's more of a flex.
Yeah, so I've got Brandon Cooks at 25, and I've got Keke Coutee at 36.
Okay. Yeah, see, I want QT there. Like, I really do. And what I look at my projections. Right now, I just, I don't know. I don't feel great. It's like sort of I'm starting these guys because you start these guys. You start the only wide receiver on Houston. You start a starting running back on Houston. You start Deshaun Watson. QT is still in that gray area for me. So I'm a little lower on him, but I do think you can get away with him as a flex.
All right, I have a question for you then, Kyle, real quick. Keke Coutee or Jamison Crowder?
That's a good question. I would actually still go Keke Coutee at that point. Jamison Crowder, great matchup against Seattle, but yet I don't want to rely on the 2 touchdown performance. They're in the same range. I've got Jamison Crowder at 41 right now. He'll probably move up as we continue throughout the week, but T.Y. Hilton, Keke Coutee at 36.
Awesome. Okay, what about Keke Coutee and Tyler Boyd, Kyle?
I'm playing QT there. I'm moving Tyler Boyd down my rankings. I don't want to rely on him breaking away a 72-yard touchdown run every single week. And the last time that we saw him out with Brandon Allen, it wasn't fantastic.
All right, Dan, your turn real quick. Keke Coutee or Michael Pittman?
I will go right now with Michael Pittman Jr. It's close. It's really close. Both guys, if I roster them, I kind of want to start them because I feel like both of them are going to have good games. But right now, my projections have Pittman Jr. about half a fantasy point higher, so I'm going to go with him.
Hey, this may sound a little off the wall, but Keke Coutee, Dan, or Tim Patrick, Denver Broncos?
That doesn't sound off the wall. Tim Patrick, CPA, are my favorite player in the world. I will go with Tim Patrick. Again, these guys are right in the same range, so let me just make it clear. They're all three of those guys are within 5 spots.
Yep.
But I do have Patrick 1 spot higher than Pittman Jr., 2 spots higher than Keke Coutee. So they're right there, great, right on the line. That's right where it is. But I will bench Coutee in that scenario.
All right, cool. So how confident are we with David Montgomery? He was pretty high on our over, so he's someone we are definitely plugging in our lineups, correct?
Yeah,
for the Bears.
Without question.
Absolutely. David Montgomery against Houston, who has just been shredded by opposing running backs this year. And he's even involved in the receiving game, too, which was a concern when we saw Mitch Trubisky take over from Nick Foles, was what is David Montgomery's receiving game involvement going to look like? He's still at 7 for me. I think that you still got to plug in David Montgomery in a fantastic matchup.
Yeah,
great.
Seventh running back is where I have him as well. So
all right,
fire him up.
Awesome. And Allen Robinson, is he going to be a must start for you, Dan? You kick it off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Allen Robinson at this point, I realize that, we're never that confident about the quarterback play or anything like that. But he's a guy who you throw in your lineup, and that's especially in this matchup against Houston where their secondary is pretty abysmal. He's my 10th ranked wide receiver, so I am starting him, above, right now I have him ranked 1 spot above Stephon Diggs, and Stephon Diggs is a must-start option every single week. So that should tell you all you need to know about how I feel about him.
Awesome. And Kyle, what about Anthony Miller?
Miller's certainly on the redraft radar, but he's not someone that I'm looking at to confidently roll in. He has a great matchup this week against Vernon Hargreaves, but yet I don't want to rely on that. He's someone that you can get away with as a flex, but yet a low-end flex. I think you have better options available to you.
All right, Lauren, look, before we get on to the next game, you guys are both married. You know that your spouse has these little idiosyncrasies that are very particular. My wife eats cereal, not with milk, but with yogurt. I don't really get it, but, that's just me. And it's on me. I hadn't really picked up on the fact that yogurt was on every single weekly grocery list for the last 2 months. I don't understand how we could possibly be going through that much yogurt. And then I figured it out. She knows I love Magic Spoon cereal, okay? And I have a rotation with the flavors. Day 1 is blueberry. Day 2 is frosted. Day 3 is fruity. Day 4 is cocoa. Slowly but surely, I've been feeling like the frosted flavor was getting abnormally low, even though I was eating the same amount of each of the flavors. And my wife would be like, must be the kids. Must be the kids. No problem. But, you have those aha moments. So it may have taken me buying 19 pounds of yogurt over the last month to realize it. But she has totally been stealing my Magic Spoon cereal. And look, what's mine is hers, what's hers is mine, vice versa, except for 2 things. Number 1, Yates, as you know, I can't even look at ice cream in my house unless she basically gives me the approval to do so. Number 2, she's not allowed to have my Magic Spoon cereal. Okay, there are a couple of things. There are a few things that are both healthy and delicious. Magic Spoon cereal is one of them, so it's mine, no sugar, 11 grams of protein, only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving, GMO-free, gluten-free, soy-free, grain-free, keto-friendly. You don't need to take my word for it. It is 100% guaranteed. You don't like it for any reason, they are going to refund your money. Go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Grab a variety pack. Use our code FantasyPros to get free shipping. That's magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Use the code FantasyPros to get free shipping.
Fantastic. That sounds delicious.
It is.
I am.
Oh, it's no joke. I'm not kidding.
I've turned into a 6-year-old again, and I am eating cereal all the time. And I didn't realize how much I loved it, because when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, I don't want cereal again. Now I'm like, that's all I want to eat is cereal. That sounds freaking amazing. I love it. All right, let's hop into our next matchup here, boys. We've got Cowboys at the Bengals. Quick question for me. I may be out of touch here, but who is the starting quarterback for the Bengals? Is it Ryan Finley or Brandon Allen still?
Brandon Allen returned to a full practice on Wednesday, so it seems like he's going to be the guy. I haven't heard anything to the contrary.
All right, great. So, Yates, what does that do for your... Sorry about that, Dan. I'm just going to steamroll right over you because...
Move it. Let's go. Let's keep rolling.
I'm the host and I can. Darn it. All right, but let me go back to you, Yates. I'm sorry he rudely interrupted you there, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
So,
My bad.
with Brandon Allen instead of Ryan Finley, how does that help? Does that hurt? Does that do nothing to your wide receiver pieces here like T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, who I know we had just talked about a little bit ago?
Yeah, so with Brandon Allen at quarterback, it boosts up T. Higgins for me, especially in this matchup against the Dallas secondary, right? That's something where I think we can confidently look at T. Higgins as a low-end wide receiver 3. Again, with Tyler Boyd, I'm really not super confident in him to the point where I want to play him as a low-end wide receiver 3. Now, if I am absolutely in a pinch and I have to plug him in as a flex option, I'm fine with that. But yet, my confidence level in Tyler Boyd specifically is a little bit less than what it is with T. Higgins. I think Higgins has a better chance of finding the end zone in this one, and that's where I want to go.
I like it. What about Giovani Bernard, Dan? Do you have any thoughts on what we should expect from him?
Yeah, you should expect to be like, ugh, I can't believe I'm starting Giovani Bernard in the playoffs, but I'm starting Giovani Bernard in the playoffs. I have him 21st right now. I mean, the Dallas run defense just... if Yates was the running back, I'd start Yates as a low-end RB2. Like, you just got to throw him out there for me. So I'm not excited about it. I'm not jonesing to do it, but I am starting him. He's my 21st right now.
Was that like a low-key dig?
Yeah, low-key digs at Yates is kind of how I do this show. So even though I'm not hosting, I'm still going to do it.
Oh, I love it. And what do you think, Yates, about Giovani Bernard after he thoroughly besmirched you?
With Giovani Bernard, I'm sitting him if I can. I'm a little bit lower than Dan. I've got him at 26 this week, and I can see moving him even further down. I get the matchup. I get it. But yet this offense is not going to be moving the ball with Brandon Allen at quarterback. And so the scoring opportunities here for Giovani Bernard, he's averaging 3.3 yards per carry on the season. It's not great. You're seeing Samaje Perine factor in here. It's just, in this game, you would need Giovani Bernard to have a guaranteed 18-plus touches for me to feel confident ranking him towards my top 20, and that's just not a guarantee.
Yeah, that's a lot of touches. Let's go over to the Cowboys if we don't have any more really fantasy-relevant things to talk about for the poor Bengals.
Certainly not.
Yeah, no. All right, Kyle, I'm going to go right back to you on this. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, what are we doing with him?
Yeah, Amari Cooper belongs in your starting lineup as a low-end wide receiver, too. Again, he's finding the end zone with regularity here. He has a tougher cornerback matchup against William Jackson this week, which just kind of shut down Devontae Parker. But with Amari Cooper, with his talent level, you plug him into your lineup. He's someone that, especially in this matchup, I think that you can confidently plug him in. CeeDee Lamb is someone worth looking at as well. I've got CeeDee Lamb at 40 in my wide receiver rankings right now. So he's a flex play, but yet does provide a safe floor. And again, in this matchup, he can easily find the end zone. So that's Michael Gallup is a little bit further down. He's starting to see some work here recently, but he's a little bit further down in my rankings. In week 14, I don't think you can trust him.
So this is a question I was actually going to ask both of you. And Dan, I will start with you. Is Michael Gallup droppable for someone who has a better matchup in week 15 or 16?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Anybody's droppable at this point.
That seems so blasphemous to me. But it's true.
Yeah. It is. I mean, Gallup, frankly, I would have felt okay if I had to drop him weeks ago at this point. So, yeah, I mean, he's 50th for me this week. So he did get more involved. It was good to see. If you're in a pinch, maybe you can start him as a flex. But for sure, I would have no problem dropping him.
Cal, you on the same page as that?
Yeah. We advised people a few weeks ago, just cut Gallup loose, right? Like, let someone else deal with the ups and downs. You're looking at his past few games here, fantasy finishes in half PPR scoring against Pittsburgh, wide receiver 71, wide receiver 66, wide receiver 47. And then last week against Baltimore, finishes as the wide receiver 10. So I really just don't want to rely on that.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to quit that name value, kind of like the conundrum we have with Marquise Hollywood Brown. Jumping into the next matchup, guys, let's move through these pretty quickly. Chiefs at Dolphins. Is this a trap game? And basically, who aren't you starting?
For the Chiefs, I'm starting everyone, basically. You're starting the big three with Kelsey, Hill, and Mahomes. At running back, I don't know how you feel, Yates. I know Fantasy Managers got completely burned by Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's 22nd for me, assuming that there's no illnesses. I assume he's going to get the workload. And I am willing to roll him out there as a low-end RB2. So for the Chiefs, I'm pretty much starting everyone.
Yeah, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire for me, I've got him at 24. I would play Raheem Mostert. I would play David Johnson above him. I just can't trust CEH at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
For the Dolphins, I know, basically you're asking everyone. I mean, I'm starting Myles Gaskin without worrying about it. Oh, my goodness. I just like to do this. We always get the tweets right in the middle. It sounds like David Johnson may not make the trip now in this game because of a personal reason. So anyway, insert Duke Johnson where we said David Johnson. I think that's what it's going to be like. This is what happens, Lauren. Whenever we do the show, it's something pops in.
It always
So
has, especially now it's Duke Johnson, David Johnson, so many D Johnsons, Deontay Johnson. It gets confusing anyway. So
start all your D Johnsons that are active. Whatever. But Myles Gaskin at this point is a borderline RB1 for me, for sure. I think that with Tua starting, Devontae Parker certainly takes a hit. He's a guy who's like a low-end wide receiver 3 kind of for me at this point in the game, just because, again, his value takes a big hit. And Mike Gesicki is a guy who I'm willing to throw out there basically each and every week, even with Tua as a low-end tight end 1.
I love it. All right, so going into the Cardinals-Giants here, I mean, obviously DeAndre Hopkins is going to be your must-start here. What about Christian Kirk? Kyle, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I'd love to plug Christian Kirk into my starting lineup, but at this point, the past few weeks have not been very favorable to him. So I think we can't rely on his target production. We can't rely, or his production at all. We can't rely on his target totals. It's just not there. So I think you need to sit Christian Kirk if you've got him.
Which is so sad considering there's such a rich history between he and good old Kyler Murray, which does feel, kind of empty at this point right now. But Dan, what about Daniel Jones? He was practicing yesterday, I believe. Mm-hmm. Is he? Yeah. Do we know if he's going to be starting? And if he's not, Colt McCoy, what about the pieces?
Yeah, we don't know whether or not he's going to be starting, at least as of now. My guess is when people are listening to this, they will know. But it does sound optimistic for him to start. Wayne Gallman is your starting regardless.
Oh, yeah.
It does not matter the matchup at this point. It does not matter anything at this point. You are starting Wayne Gallman. That's where we are right now in this time of fantasy football. I'm assuming that Daniel Jones starts, and if he does, I don't care. Like, whether or not it's Colt McCoy or not, I think the highest wide receiver I have is Sterling Shepard, and he's in the low 40s. So as a flex, maybe he's the only guy who I'd be willing to start of the wide receivers. And if at Evan Ingram, I would be willing to start to the extent it is Daniel Jones. I have him as like a mid-range, kind of low-end-ish tight end 1. If it's Colt McCoy, I'm avoiding everybody except Gallman in the matchup.
Ooh, rough. What about you, Kyle? Any thoughts on those Giants?
Yeah, Dan hit the nail on the head. Wayne Gallman belongs in your starting lineup. Evan Ingram is someone who I'm a little bit more confident in, even if Colt McCoy is a starting quarterback, but I am expecting Daniel Jones back. I don't think you can play Daniel Jones because the value from him comes with his ability to scramble and to pick up that rushing yardage. If he is hampered with that hamstring injury, that's not going to be the case here. So I think, you can really, Evan Ingram and Wayne Gallman are really the only ones who I'm looking at.
Can I ask one quick question?
No, moving on. I'm kidding.
No, but Yates, where do you have Kyler Murray ranked this week?
I have Kyler Murray still as a QB1. I have him at 9.
I have him at 11, so I kind of want to point that out just because it sort of shocks me when I do it, because Murray was so dominant in the beginning of the season. But whether it's the shoulder injury, whatever it is, the fact that he's not running around the goal line, this is something where when on our start sit shows, Yates, on Sunday morning, like, people are going to ask me these close questions about Kyler Murray, and I think it's going to be the first time that I'm really at this point going to be able to say, am I starting Tom Brady or Kyler Murray? I might start Tom Brady in this matchup. So it is something where I think at least that I want to point that out, that I'm still a QB1, but I'm not particularly high on Murray this week.
And that's an excellent segue, Dan, because our very next matchup I want to talk about is going to be the Vikings and the Buccaneers. So out of these guys, who are you sitting? It's another one of those fantasy-rich matchups that we have going forward, but can we start every single piece here, or are there people that we should be looking to keep on our bench?
No, I think legitimately we can start every piece. I mean, I think Kirk Cousins falls outside the top 12 quarterbacks, but he is somebody who, barely for me. He's 14th. I'm starting Dalvin Cook. I'm starting Ronald Jones at this point without question. I'm not all that worried about it. Pretty much every wide receiver. I mean, I think Antonio Brown falls into the flex conversation for me, but other than that, assuming that Mike Evans is healthy, right, I'm willing to start him. Again, he was downgraded to did not practice on Thursday. We'll see what Friday says, but that's fine. And Rob Gronkowski is also a guy who at this point I'm just kind of firing up. We'll see what happens with the tight ends. I think if Kyle Rudolph does miss this game and Irv Smith does play, you might be able to stream Irv Smith, but it pretty much is a start everybody in this game for me.
Exactly. And Kyle Rudolph did miss practice yesterday, and Irv Smith is back at practice. Kyle, quick question for you. Mm-hmm. If Mike Evans misses, what does that do for Tom Brady in your eyes?
It really doesn't move the needle all that much. I mean, Tom Brady is currently at QB 10 in my rankings, so if Mike Evans misses, he might drop down to like QB 12. But I still think that you're starting him. It would be more beneficial for Antonio Brown, who I think would see an uptick in targets and would move into that like mid-range wide receiver 3 conversation versus, where he's at currently as a flex. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Mike Evans does return to practice today. But I think, you hit the nail on the head, Lauren. Like, you got to start all these options here this week.
Yeah, it's hard for me to try to sit anybody here, especially just with the go big or go home, guys. Week 14. Let's go. Yeah. All right. The next one we have going on is the Broncos. Thank goodness they have a quarterback, I guess, sort of, against the Panthers. This is a pretty good matchup for Noah Fant here. How confident are we with Noah Fant with Drew Lock back at quarterback?
You want me to start, Yates? You want to start?
Yeah, I don't know which one to give this to because I don't want to hear the answer.
Give it to anybody. Give it to anybody you want. We're ready.
Go ahead, Kyle. You go ahead and start this one off.
Yeah, with Noah Fant, just based on the tight end position, we got to continue to plug in Noah Fant. Even though we might see he doesn't really have as high of a ceiling with Drew Lock at quarterback, he's still someone who's seen consistent targets in this offense, who is still delivering a safe floor every single week. And so I think that you got to continue to plug him in as a low-end tight end one. It all depends on your other options. But I do think that Fant can have fantasy value this week.
I love it. And Dan, what about Melvin Gordon or Phillip Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm starting Gordon at this point. I don't feel great about it, but he is 17th in my ranking. Lindsay is a guy who you have to be pretty desperate for me to feel comfortable relying on in my in my playoff matchup, even though it's a good one. So I'm starting Gordon with not all that much hesitation, but for now I try to bench Lindsay if I could.
All right, I like it. So on the Panthers side, DJ Moore is out, right, with COVID after he's been dealing with his ankle injury?
So I don't know, Yates, maybe you can correct me. Has he actually been declared out? I know he's on the COVID list and he tested positive. We can assume, I think, that he's out, but because of the weird protocols, we don't technically know yet.
Yeah, so I wrote this game up earlier today and was trying to do my projections, and it was just essentially I have no idea. I think he still is eligible to play in this game, but not only is he dealing with the COVID concerns and the fact that he hasn't practiced all week, he had that non-contact injury. He went down with that non-contact injury 2 weeks ago before their bye, and so we don't really know what his health status is. So there's a ton of uncertainty here with DJ Moore heading into this matchup. I said if he plays, you can look at him as a low-end wide receiver 3, but he is a very, very risky play heading into your round 1 of the fantasy football playoffs.
Yeah, but where there's injuries to DJ Moore, there's also opportunity here then for Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. Dan, what do you take from those?
Yeah, again, Curtis Samuel also on the COVID reserve list, but I think we are all expecting him to come off by the time because, again, it's a close contact thing. So as long as he tests negative, he's fine. So I've ranked right now, no DJ Moore, yes, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, and I agree. I have Anderson 13th in this matchup, and I have Samuel 21st. They are both guys who I am starting with no hesitation in this matchup without DJ Moore.
All right, so what about Teddy Bridgewater here? Is he someone that you would think about starting, streaming?
No, not for me. I get it, where we are. He's not the worst option that you can have, and if you're in a pinch, it's fine. He's my 17th ranked quarterback, but that means that I probably have guys who I'm willing to start over him. So for me, he's somebody who, if you're in an absolute pinch, if you've got a lot of these backup quarterbacks that have been rostered or something, you can get away with him, but I'm still trying to avoid if I can.
I like it. Okay, so this quarterback has actually been really surprising me, but Mike Glennon for the Jaguars. What? Hi, welcome back. The Titans are taking on the Jaguars. Obviously, this is going to be a bounce-back game for Derrick Henry, right?
Nah, I'd bench Derrick Henry,
right?
Everyone. Do that. No. We've seen what he does to the Jaguars, and we see what he does. So he's my number one this week. I assume he is yours, Yates?
Yeah, he's in that range for me, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so Yates, what do you, A.J. Brown, do we have any more clarity on what his status is? And, I guess, Yates, where do you have Corey Davis?
Yeah, great question. So with A.J. Brown, it sounds like even though he missed back-to-back practices this week, I got an alert from the FantasyPros news desk earlier today that A.J. Brown is expected to play. So I think we can comfortably rely on him as a top 5 option. We've seen him miss some practices this year and come out and just absolutely dominate in the next game. And then Corey Davis, at this point, he's a top 20 option for me. We've got to talk about Corey Davis is one of the most consistent wide receivers in all of fantasy football this season. He's actually outproducing A.J. Brown in some metrics here. So I think that Corey Davis absolutely belongs in your starting lineup, especially in this matchup.
I agree, and as much as I don't like to admit it, I agree with you, because I'm an A.J. Brown truther, not a huge fan of Corey Davis, just because he's burned me more than once. Dan, anyone else, you got any sleepers in here? What about Jonnu Smith or any other tight ends that we're looking at for the Titans?
I don't know if I could talk about Jonnu Smith. Yates, do we know that because Yates is so personally involved?
I know.
First of all, Yates.
I always put it to you.
Know?
You give it to Yates. I'll just go to Yates now.
No. Yates, do we know whether or not Jonnu's going to play?
It sounds like he practiced in full yesterday, so I would assume that he's going to play. He's a touchdown-dependent tight end too. Still, for me, he's got to score. Now you can look at this matchup and you can say he has an excellent chance of scoring, but that's just a risky game to play.
Yeah. So, by the way, I do want to point out one thing because of what Yates said, that you got the alert on A.J. Brown, which, by the way, I completely agree with Yates' take on both Brown and Corey Davis. But that is something that I will remind everybody that if you have import your team to my playbook, you can set yourself to have alerts on just your players so that when you get news on that player, when our news desk, which is great, they work nonstop all the time, they're hardworking. As soon as you get an alert for them, as soon as they post anything, it will pop up on your phone. So again, go into, use your app and do my playbook and then set alerts for the players in your league. You will get notified as soon as there is any news on them. So sorry about that. I agree with Yates. If it's Ferkser, if it's Jonnu Smith, I'm just not starting at either tight end for whoever plays for the tight end.
I feel you. And I'll throw in one name here for the Jags. Colin Johnson is someone maybe to keep your eyes on. It may be more of a DFS play, but he's been pretty intriguing with Mike Lennon at quarterback.
I will say that I will probably wind up ranking DJ Chark as a wide receiver 3, and I get that it's been gross. They're going to need to throw at this point. Chark's still getting the targets, so he's probably, I like the Johnson call as like a deep sleeper,
right?
But I think I would probably wind up starting and vomiting a little in my mouth DJ Chark this week. And just kind of hoping for the best as a wide receiver.
I love DJ Chark too, so I totally feel you on that. All right, let's go ahead and move over to the afternoon slate of games, guys. We've got Colts at Raiders. The Raiders continue to confuse me. This is a very interesting game. I am waiting on pins and needles to figure out what is going on with Josh Jacobs. And Devontae Booker was very unimpressive when he filled in for him last time. What are we doing if it's Devontae Booker that's starting instead of Josh Jacobs?
Who do you want to answer?
I'm going to throw this. Okay. Let me harness my inner chi. I'm going to go with Dan. I'm putting you on the hot seat this time.
All right. So right now I'm not ranking Jacobs. I'm ranking Booker as if he's starting. And again, I hope Jacobs can play. Booker is a guy who, again, is kind of in that, RB3 flex conversation for me. It's not a good matchup, again, but he did get, however many touches he got last week, 15, 16, whatever it was. So if he's going to get that amount of work, it's just like when we're in this range of running back, it's gross. I'll take the touches at this point and start him as a very, very uninspiring flex play at this point, like 28th in my RB rank.
Oh, Yates, please tell me you have better news.
I've got Devontae Booker at 27, so I think I would play him over Giovani Bernard because I think he has more guaranteed volume and it probably is going to have around the same level of efficiency. So even with a very tough matchup for Booker and a very easy matchup for Bernard, but yeah, Devontae Booker, I was super excited for him last week. It didn't pay off. This is a very tough matchup for opposing running backs. I'm going to temper expectations here a little bit. I've got him at 27.
Yeah, that Colts D is no joke. Okay, speaking of running backs, let's go to the other side of the ball. Which one do you think has a better game here, gentlemen? Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Taylor? And Kyle, I'll start with you.
Yeah, this is a Jonathan Taylor game. Las Vegas Raiders, again, just like the Houston Texans, have just been gashed by opposing running backs on the ground this season. They're giving up a crazy amount of touchdowns to opposing running backs as well. So I think this is a game where you can lean into, we saw it kind of mixed towards the first half of last game where, and again, Jonathan Taylor coming off of not playing the week prior, where they kind of mixed it up. You had Nyheim Hines, you had Jordan Wilkins, but as that game progressed, you saw Jonathan Taylor get the majority of the carries as the game went on. I think that this is going to be a Jonathan Taylor game. I've got him as a top 12 running back this week.
Oh, I like it. Okay, Dan, one for you here. Tight ends. Anyone on the Colts that you would maybe squeeze in there if you were desperate at the position?
Nope. I refuse to start a Colts tight end at this point.
It is so tricky.
No. I mean, they're gonna be targets. I think my top one might be Trey Burton, but he's like a borderline tight end 2 for me at this point. So I'm avoiding all tight ends on the Colts.
Oh man, I hear you. Any streaming options on quarterbacks here? Phillip Rivers, he's practicing again, right?
Yeah, he is practicing. He's fighting through the toe injury. Again, he's in the slightly higher, he's one spot ahead of Teddy Bridgewater. So it's basically if you're desperate, if you're in a spot, I do think that Rivers is probably going to have a pretty decent game in this one. So I'm willing to go with him. I prefer him certainly to Derek Carr, the other quarterback.
All right, I like it. All right, let's go ahead and move on here. Jets at Seahawks. Just caveat here. I think Frank Gore is actually supposed to play. So I am so sorry for anyone who picked up Ty Johnson, like me, and totally wasted a waiver spot. That really stinks. Yates, what are you feeling about Frank Gore? Who would you start over Frank Gore, or who would you put Frank Gore in over in this matchup against the Seahawks?
Yeah, so you ask who would I start over Frank Gore? Pretty much anyone.
Good. Thank you.
with Gore, you're looking at the Seahawks. Again, a very tough matchup for opposing running backs. We've talked about that all season. So with Frank Gore, I think that you are plugging him into your lineup because he's going to get the volume. He's a high-end RB3 for me, kind of in that same territory of these other guys, with Devontae Booker, Giovani Bernard, Damien Harris right from last night. I think that's kind of what we need to expect from Frank Gore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let me stick with you here, Kyle. Besides Jamison Crowder, since we mentioned him earlier, how are you feeling about Breshad Perriman? You willing to give him a go?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. So Tags just messaged our group just a little bit ago and said that Jamison Crowder is likely out, which I had not heard that. Looks like it was a calf.
So I think I will want to clarify that he tweaked, I guess, what was it, his calf or something like that. I don't think he's likely out, but he is definitely questionable at this point, and I think but we should analyze it as if it's possible he's not going to play.
Yeah, so I'll analyze it both ways. So if he plays, I think that you can rely on Crowder as a high-end flex play. Breshad Perriman, you're looking at Denzel Mims out for this game as well, dealing with a personal emergency was how it was classified. So
let's hope he's okay.
Yeah, obviously our thoughts and prayers for him and his family, but I think with Denzel Mims, with him being out, Breshad Perriman should see an uptick in targets. You're looking at Seattle as a favorable matchup for opposing wide receivers. But then I think it's hard to trust Perriman as anything more than a flex play a boom or bust flex play. I'll classify it as that. Someone who absolutely could go off or absolutely could just crush your lineup. So Jamison Crowder, if he does play, even if he is a little bit hampered here with a calf injury, again, looking for more information. You might have more by the time you listen to this. I think Crowder's probably the one that I'll still go with, even if he's a little hampered.
Yeah, I like it. And this should be a bounce back game on the other side of the ball here for Russell Wilson, who's been pretty fantasy disappointing in the last few weeks. Dan, what do you make of that?
I know. It's been really, Yates and I had a big sort of discussion, I think it was last week, right,
yeah.
Yates, where he was like, I don't get why he's number 2. And I was like, whatever, he's my number 2, leave me alone. And Yates, as usual, was correct. And now he's my number 1. So that's what I have him right now. You can't not against the Jets. They are desperate for a win. You can't run the ball that well against the Jets. You can pass all over them at this point. I think it's just going to be a huge game for Russell Wilson. So he's my number 1 quarterback right now. So no hesitation about starting.
All right, I like it. Let's go ahead and move on here. Packers at Lions. This one I don't think we need to spend too much time on, other than if DeAndre Swift is active, do you start him? Is he a must start?
Who you want to go to?
I don't know. One of you guys just jump in, because this is another one where I'm like, I don't know. Please, someone whoever has the better news, speak first. Go.
I will go in. I think Swift is going to play, but it's still questionable right now. I mean, he was limited in practice, I believe, earlier this week. Yates, you can correct me if you have any difference, but here's my take on it. If Swift plays, I am starting him as an RB2. Right now, I have him ranked 18th. Given the fact that builds in, if he was fully healthy, everything like that, he'd probably be a borderline RB1 in this matchup. But for now, I have him at 18th, and I wouldn't start any other running back for the Lions. If Swift is out, I'm starting Adrian Peterson. It's disgusting, but what can you do? He's going to get the goal line work. We've shown that he's got 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. The Lions will need to run to try to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field. That's how you attack the Green Bay defense. So I would have Peterson as probably a low-end RB2 for me.
All right, I do like it. Galladay's still questionable, although there's some glimmer of hope that he actually plays. But I'm so upset with Kenny Galladay, I'm verklempt. I can't handle it. Let me ask you a quick question though here. Matt Stafford, is he someone that you're willing to play? I'm actually looking in my lineup, Stafford or Taysom Hill.
Yeah, it's good.
I would play Taysom Hill there pretty easily. Stafford has been very inconsistent this season, and in the games that he's supposed to perform well, he disappoints, and in the games that he is supposed to be on your bench, he performs well. It's just too much volatility for me. I think there are definitely better options that you can look at. I've got Stafford outside my top 16 quarterbacks on the week. I'll go back to DeAndre Swift really quick for me. I think with Swift, it is trending. The news that we got earlier today is Darrell Bevell saying that he is trending towards playing. However, Bevell has also said that there's a possibility that he doesn't receive his full workload, and that scares the crap out of me. So with Swift, I do think that he is someone, it all depends on the options that you have available, but he's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 for me, and it's something that I would prefer, honestly, obviously not if I were the Swift manager, but if Swift, I would prefer Swift to be out, to be declared out for this game, so that way we have the clarity here that I can plug in Adrian Peterson as a top 20 back against Green Bay, who, again, we've talked about Houston, Detroit. Green Bay's been gashed just as much as them. So yeah, I think that's a situation that I'd love to see play out, but I don't think that it's just they're gonna cancel each other out, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, on the side of the Packers here, again, who aren't you starting? Really, against the Lions?
Yeah.
You're starting everyone.
You start, I think, without question, as high-end options, you start Rodgers, Jones, Devontae Adams, and Robert Tonyan at this point. I mean, we talked about his fantasy over-under. You just start all those, and you avoid everybody else.
All right, Dan, what about Marvin Jones, real quick?
Marvin Jones is in the sort of the equivalent of the running back person who I'm like, oh man, I'm not excited to start Marvin Jones, but of course I'm starting Marvin Jones. I do have him. Look, he's not like a wide receiver 2. He's 32nd for me right now in my wide receiver rankings. He's going to end up in the end within 2 or 3 spots of that. So he's someone who I'll start. He's the only game in town, not the greatest matchup, but assuming that Kenny Golladay is out, by the way, which I am. If Kenny Golladay is out, I am starting him as a wide receiver 3. If Kenny Golladay is in, I'm avoiding him.
Yeah, I think TJ Hawkinson is someone that you probably have to start, and you won't like doing it. Yates, you disagree or agree with that?
No, at this point, TJ Hawkinson belongs in your starting lineup every single week. Allen Lazard, Dan mentioned that he would say everyone else. Allen Lazard is someone who's in my starting lineup as a high-end flex play that comes with ridiculous upside in this matchup.
Yep, agreed. All right, moving right along. Saints at Eagles. I mean, Saints, again, one of those situations, we love those players, but what does Jalen Hurts do to the surrounding pieces, and how scared should we be? Let's go ahead. Actually, I'm gonna put this one to Kyle first because I'm very curious to hear what he has to say, Dan, and then I'll let you come in.
Good enough.
Yeah, with Jalen Hurts, we talked about it in the over-under that I really I went to do my projections for this game earlier and was just like, who freaking knows? Like,
okay, so I'm not alone that I have no idea what's going to happen.
No,
like,
not
I just
at
have
all.
no
like,
clue.
With Jalen Hurts, it's really interesting. I talked about it earlier on this week on the podcast. Was like, what are we going to see them do with a full week declaring that Jalen Hurts as a starter on Tuesday, I believe it was? Does that give them enough time in practice to be able to kind of retool the offense and build it around his skill set, which is more of as a mobile quarterback? If that's the case, then you really cannot trust any of these wide receiver options. However, against the Saints, is that actually going to work? So I personally, if I had the opportunity, I would be sitting every single Philadelphia Eagles player that I had. Like Miles Sanders is a low-end RB2 for me. I have very
Which is so
confidence.
crazy, right?
Right. Like I would love to plug in Miles Sanders, but at this point against the Saints, I have absolutely no confidence in him whatsoever. Dallas Goedert, again, who does Jalen Hurts lock onto? That's kind of the conversation with a rookie quarterback going up against the New Orleans Saints defense. So really, if I had the opportunity, I would be sitting every single one if I could.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree there whatsoever. Dan, what about you? Are you in that same category, or is there a player that you'd plug in here and cross your fingers?
I think Yates nailed it. I'm definitely not starting any Eagles wide receiver whatsoever. Right now, Yates, my initial projections has Sanders 30th in running back ranking, just because it's a horrible matchup. It's somebody who I'm trying to get away from, which is insane that Miles Sanders is like a borderline flex play. Got it right now, still sneaks into my top 12, but barely. He's somebody who I would be trying to get away from. Again, there's just too much uncertainty. I think Hurts will probably wind up having a passable QB2 type day just with his legs, but it's a terrible matchup. There's too much uncertainty to trust in your fantasy playoffs. So pretty much I think Yates nailed it.
Yep, I totally agree with that, guys. All right, let's move right along here since we're getting a little low on time. Falcons at Chargers. We just learned that Julio Jones was out, right, Dan?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so what does that mean for our other pieces on that offense, which is kind of obvious, but go for it.
I mean, I think you were starting Calvin Ridley regardless of whatever was going on, so that's fine. I'm not willing to roll with any other piece as a wide receiver. I mean, I think we've seen enough that, like, oh, maybe I could start Russell Gage. I'm just not. Like, I'm just, it's Ridley or bust for me, a wide receiver. I think Matt Ryan takes a bit of a hit. He was 13th in my rankings. My guess is he will fall to 15th just because we see what he does without Julio Jones in the lineup. And Hayden Hurst kind of remains in that sort of borderline low end, for me, tight end 1 range. But that's really it. The running backs, I don't want any piece really of really any of them if I can avoid it. But so for the most part, the big impact is just a little boost for me for Hayden Hurst and a little bit of a downgrade for Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And on the Chargers side, we all agreed that this should be a great bounce back game for Justin Herbert. You're starting Keenan Allen, you're starting Hunter Henry. What about Mike Williams, Kyle? Where do you have him?
Yeah, he's a flex play for me, but comes with ridiculous upside in this matchup against the Atlanta secondary. So I think if you were looking for, I've talked about it, if you're that 8 seed in your playoffs, you're the 6 seed and you're going up against that a higher ranked team and you know that you have to score some points here, I think Williams is an option for you to plug in that could absolutely go off in this matchup. And then Austin Eckler, for me, I'm plugging him right back into my lineup as a low-end RB1.
Love it. Love it. And his usage has been so fantastic since he's come back from injury, which is awesome if you were able to hang on to him. Let's move right along to Washington at 49ers. What do you guys think? Yay, nay?
For everybody in the whole thing?
And yeah, is there anyone else that you want to talk about in that previous matchup, I guess was my underhanded way of saying it.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant, what do you think about players in this game? Yay or nay? I was like,
let's move on to the next game. Yay or nay?
No, we're good.
Let's go.
Go ahead.
All right, so we have the football team at the 49ers, which I'll never get used to. Real quick here, is Washington a good DST to start here?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, I think so. They are, you've seen the San Francisco offense sort of get to the point where you don't know what you're going to get from them. If you force them to rely on Nick Mullins, then you're going to be able to put up points. Washington gets a ton of pressure. So for me, they fall within my top 12 DSTs. Again, not like an elite option, but I have them ranked 11th right now. So certainly if you're rostering them at this stage, you're going to be able to get away with it.
I love it. And Kyle, Deebo Samuel's still questionable, correct?
From what I understand, but I would expect him to play in this one.
Does his presence help or hurt Brandon Ayuk?
At this point, it doesn't really quite matter. Over his last 4 games, Brandon Ayuk hasn't finished lower than the wide receiver 19.5 PPR scoring. So you're talking about one of the most consistent and upside plays at the wide receiver position. So even if Deebo Samuel's back in the lineup this week, I think that you can confidently roll out Brandon Ayuk. I would actually prefer Brandon Ayuk over Deebo Samuel this week.
Yes. See, this is why I pass these things to you, because I need to hear your positivity, and you're telling me what I want to hear. I love it.
I agree with Yates. I would have said the same thing. I have Ayuk ranked ahead of Deebo Samuel just because he's cooler than me, whatever.
All right, so we already just discussed a little bit about what we were or not going to do with Mostert against this Washington defense. They're the third best against running backs, which is, again, something that does still kind of surprise me. They've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving touchdowns to the running backs. But, Dan, let me go here really quickly. Who would you start Mostert over in this matchup?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll give you the guys ranked right behind Mostert in half PPR. I have Mostert 25th. I have a lot of trepidation just because I don't know what we're going to... Last game was so outrageous that Wilson, who looked fine, got that many touches. I think Mostert's probably going to carve out a bigger role. He's 25th here for me, even in this. So I've got him right above Devontae Booker, McKissick, Hines, Sanders, Todd Gurley, Devin Singletary. So for me, that's where Mostert sort of falls for me, at least in my RB ranking.
I like it. Poor Devin Singletary. It's like he's allergic to the end zone. It's
hey,
not
he
fun.
Might get. I mean, look, he had the big game that I think Pittsburgh is going to be angry in this game, though, even with all their injuries.
Yeah, and speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about the Steelers at the Bills. James Conner should be back. Yates, how do you feel about James Conner in this game?
I've got him as a mid-range RB2. I think that he's going to walk back in and see his workload. They need to get more towards a balanced attack here on offense, but he has been pretty inefficient this season, so I don't think that we can comfortably rely on him as anything more than a mid-range RB2, but he's someone that absolutely belongs in your starting lineup.
I mean, I agree. As long as Conner can get more than 1 yard, he'll be an asset to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is very, very sad. So I know this is always a question here, guys. I'm going to go ahead and start this off, and I'll kick it to Dan. My rankings of the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers, who are all very good. I go Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Chase Claypool, but I like Chase Claypool's upside much better than Juju Smith-Schuster. Who are you starting? All of them, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
hard.
I will say for this, and I'm interested to hear what Yates says about this, because we used to just sort of like say, okay, we don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to rank all 3 of them right next to each other as wide receiver 2s and see what happens. I do have a little bit of a different ranking with them. Deontay Johnson is the clear-cut guy who's ahead of everyone in this one. Despite the drops, he's having the most, he's getting the most targets. He has the most production. So he's 17th for me. So I am rolling him out there. Now, I am outraged at what happened to Chase Claypool in this last game, about the fact that he lost so many snaps and so many routes run behind James Washington. I have him ranked 31st, so he's still a guy who's a flex play for me. And Juju Smith-Schuster for me right now is 36th. He's just like, he's got to get targeted more than 4 yards down the field at this point to basically, for me to feel comfortable he's going to have value. And if not for the very end of that game where he got peppered with a few targets, he would have been completely non-existent whatsoever. So for me, all three of the guys rank as at least wide receiver 3s. Deontay Johnson is the only one that I feel particularly comfortable starting.
Yeah, I like that. We're now friends again, Dan, because I like that answer.
Good.
That's
Thank
really great.
goodness. I've been waiting for the take that would get us there.
I know. We're now besties. Yates, do you have anything that's different than that? Anything that's the same? How do you feel? Tell me about your feelings.
You mentioned that Chase Claypool has the highest upside, and I think I do agree, but yet he's got to get onto the field more than what we saw last week. So that's concerning. I think I've got Claypool in the same territory of Allen Lazard. I think that you kind of look at their situations and you say they have to find the end zone. They both come with ridiculous upside, but they have to find the end zone to be finish higher than where they're ranked. And for me, that's at 37 for Chase Claypool, 32 for Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju, I mean, he can soak up targets. He gets more value in full PPR formats, but averaging 8.2 yards per reception this season, ridiculous. Like, it's just so bad. And then Deontay Johnson, for me, is the guy, though. I've got him all the way up at 20. I think you just continue to plug him into your lineup. No matter the drops, whatever, he's still getting the targets.
All right.
I will say though that in full PPR to say what Yates said, I do have Juju Smith-Schuster higher than Claypool because I think in full PPR he does get that boost. In half PPR though, if I'm forced to choose between the two, I will take the upside with Claypool. And I think the fact that they lost that game, Yates, this is what gives me a little hope, right? You're like, okay, fine, you want to put Chase Claypool to the side, you lose this game. Hopefully you get him back in there and see what he can do. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I really like it. Just real quick, guys, where do you have? Let's start with Kyle on this one. Where do you have Eric Ebron ranked?
Ebron belongs in your starting lineup. 11 targets back-to-back weeks here. I've got Ebron at 7. I can make the case for him to move up, though.
Oh, he has the dropsies, which always scares me. But again, he's one of those must-starts. Dan, how do you have him?
I have him 10th. I agree. He's sort of, and again, Yates and I talk about it every week. Once you get to 7, maybe 8, the next 10 guys are all right there in the same exact range in terms of projection. So I have him 10th. If you catch passes for the Steelers, you automatically have the dropsies. That's just a requirement, I believe, for if you do. He's still getting enough targets, enough production for a tight end that I am just starting him pretty much each and every week.
All right, is Big Ben Roethlisberger going to be on your radar as a starter this week? Go with Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I thought it was. By the way, I will say, just had the tweet that Curtis Samuel has been activated from the COVID-19 list, so he is very good. So what we said is correct. Yeah, Roethlisberger's 12th for me. I mean, they just throw so much that I feel like and they're going to need points because Buffalo is going to be able to put up points on them, especially given their injuries and defense. I mean, they really need to revamp their offense right now because I think I'm going to throw 55 times with an average depth of target of 6 yards is going to need to be changed. But I do think Roethlisberger at this point, given how much they throw, is my 12th ranked quarterback. I'd feel okay starting.
I like it. And Kyle, what about you? Where do you have Ben Roethlisberger?
Exactly the same spot. He belongs in your starting lineup as a low-end
Twinsies. Love it. All right, a little bit more of a tougher question here. We did bring up Devin Singletary for the Bills. Is he someone that you guys are going to be looking at? I mean, I know he's had a little bit better game. What about Zach Moss? I mean, he's a rookie that was really hot. Now he's fumbling all over the place. What do we do? Dan, you start first.
I just can't trust Moss because of that. I liked Moss. I've advocated for Moss all season long ahead of Devin Singletary. But after that game, what are you gonna do? He's a little banged up. And again, whenever you are at this position where you have the chance to, take the role, you fumble, and then we don't basically see you again for the rest of the day, there's no way I'm going to be able to trust you at this point. I don't fully trust Devin Singletary, as I sort of said, but if forced to choose between the two, I would start Devin Singletary as a flex, and I would avoid Zach Moss at all costs in this.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, obviously you're going to be firing up Josh Allen, Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs. I mean, I really like that a lot. And Kyle, I really want you to dive in here on the Monday night game. The Ravens at the Browns. Tell me your first reactions just real quick when you think about that Monday night game, because it's the last one of Week 14, and it has a lot of implications for our fantasy squads.
It absolutely does. It's going to be everyone's going to be on tilt watching this game. So Lamar Jackson,
I'm already on tilt, and
right.
This hasn't even started.
Lamar Jackson is someone who belongs back in your starting lineup. I've got him at 7 this week, so I think that you can absolutely plug him into your lineup. You're starting to see, we had the concerns, right, Dan? We were talking about this, what does he look like coming off of actually testing positive for COVID? Is he affected like the way Cam Newton was? We didn't see that. He was back to, breaking off a long touchdown run, actually looked better as a passer. Now we can talk about the matchup against Dallas, benefiting that. But yet I think here against Cleveland, it's not a matchup to be feared either as far as a passing attack. So you're going to get Mark Andrews back in this game. He should, have a couple of touchdowns. He torched them for 5 and 58 and 2 in Week 1 when they played last time. So Marquise Brown is the one who's really interesting here. I think that Brown is the one who I'm still looking at as a flex option. I'm not overreacting to what we've seen here the past 2 weeks, but he, again, kind of in that same territory what I talked about with Mike Williams, absolutely has the potential to go off in this matchup. He can give you that week winning upside, but again, it's a risky play. He could give you, the huge blow-up performance, or he could absolutely crush your lineup. So I really want to just keep him kind of in that flex range. You probably have better options that you can roll with. But that's probably about it for Baltimore. Or Dobbins, excuse me. Dobbins, I'm going to keep plugging him back into my lineup. You're seeing him lead this backfield. Yes, you would love to see him get 15 plus, 18 touches, every single week. He would absolutely crush. But yet, he's still leading this backfield. In this matchup, I think he should do enough to be able to return mid-range RB2 value.
Oh, I like it. Dan, what do you think about this? You agree? Don't agree?
I think pretty much with everything Yates said. I have Brown as like a borderline wide receiver 3, just outside that range. I can certainly see scenarios where I'm starting him, but yeah, I agree. I'm not completely overreacting to what we've seen really the last 2 games. As for Dobbins, man, just do the Jonathan Taylor thing, do the Cam Akers thing, just give him the work, let him run with it. He would be probably an RB1 if they did, with his snap count still sort of sharing everything with the guys. He's at 20 for me, and Lamar Jackson is my 5th ranked quarterback. As he had said, he and I had some conversations before it started. What would we see? I love what I saw. I feel totally confident with him going in, as I will with Andrews when he's out there.
Awesome. And on the other side of the ball here, what are we doing with Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry? Dan, let's start with you first.
Yeah, Baker, I get that he had a phenomenal game against the Titans. This is just not the same. I'm not going near Baker Mayfield this week really in anything other than 2 QB leagues, and even then I'm going to be like, maybe. As for Jarvis Landry, I think now we've got a pretty good baseline as to what we're going to see in a non-crazy wind game, and that is you're going to get enough targets to make you in at least the wide receiver 3 conversation. So I have him 29th right now. That's probably around where he's going to end up for me when I'm finished updating my projections on Saturday night. A guy you can get out there, probably not a ton of upside in this matchup, but I will be willing to roll him out there as somebody who I'll start at least as a wide receiver 3.
All right, love it. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, completely agree. I'm sitting Baker Mayfield. I'm playing Jarvis Landry as a low-end wide receiver 3 based on his target volume. And then I think with the running backs, Nick Chubb, you still got to plug him in. Even though this is a tough matchup, he has just been insanely efficient this season. You got to be plugging Nick Chubb into your starting lineup as a mid-range RB1. Kareem Hunt's the interesting one, and I'd be really interested to see where Dan has him ranked, because this is a difficult evaluation for me. You could see that the narrative that they have to throw the ball a little bit more. They could lean on Kareem Hunt out of the backfield, but it hasn't happened so far this season. I'm really confused as to what to do with Kareem Hunt.
I'm not going to be able to offer any clarity for you, Yates, because I hate my ranking of him, and I feel he's a guy who every week I struggle with, because I'm like, I don't think you really should be here, but I guess you're going to be here when all things are said and done. Right now I'm 24th, Yates, at my running back ranking, which is low for where I usually have him, generally speaking. He hasn't even been getting the targets. He hasn't been involved in the passing game anyway. You sort of are like, well, it's going to turn into one of those games, but he hasn't really been doing that anyway. But for me, look, once you're here, again, Devontae Booker, would I rather roll the dice with Devontae Booker or Kareem Hunt? I'll probably take my chances with Kareem Hunt. So he's 24th for me, Yates. Where is he for you?
He's 26th for me, right in front of Devontae Booker.
Yep, that's basically we're at the same spot.
I am really interested to watch that game, not only just for the division, for fantasy, for everything football. It's going to be an awesome Week 14. Do you guys have anything else to add? And if you don't, Dan, take us home.
You did a great job, Lauren. I really appreciate it. You see, though, right? You see how hard it is to get all these games in.
It is. Because I want to spend so much time just diving into every single player, and I can't.
I know. Thankfully, we have the 4th greatest fantasy football analyst of all time, Kyle Yates, on the show to just bang it out, do good. Yates, you did a great job. Lauren, you did a way better job than me. I'm sorry you don't host this Friday show every day. I'm probably taking back the reins next week, though, because it's my show and we only have a couple left and I miss it. Anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. Reminder, thank you to Magic Spoon. Remember, go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros, grab a variety pack, use our code FantasyPros to get free shipping. You know the deal. Tags and I will be back on our Sunday night recap show. As I had mentioned to the guys here, it's my daughter's birthday on Sunday, so you're going to hear a lot of, I wasn't really watching football all that closely. I hope I'm not, misstating anything, but we will be there on Sunday night. I hope you tune in, and I'll talk to you then.
Looking for useful content, fantasy relevant information, and the data that can help your team win? Then make sure to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Fantasy Pros, so we can help you dominate your league all season long.